Hello everyone, this is the best guy ever. I've got a little bit of a different video here for you today. It's an unscripted talk about an idea I had that I thought might be of interest and, dare I say, use in our ongoing quest to have meaningful online media discourse. It's actually an excerpt from a show I do called the BGE Monthly Cast that's available to my Patreon and Subscribestar supporters. Now, if you're wondering, that little feeling you just felt inside is the Lord compelling you to go sign up to get the full episode where I talk about the Lucifer and Biscuit Hammer anime, a spicy rant about Spider-Man No Way Home, and of course more Attack on Titan thoughts. Plus there are 20-odd other episodes of similarly sterling quality. Now, I just thought this topic here was juicy enough to bring to the unwashed masses and let you know the gold you're missing out on, so here it is. But be advised, there's a lot more where that came from, so maybe go check out the BGE Monthly Cast, as well as helping to support my channel. Big arigatos, now let's get on with it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a real treat lined up for you, cause here on the show, sometimes I like to put a little bit of extra effort into stuff, and this is one of those times. I've got another idea I've been cooking up for a while based on, some of the discussions I've been having and stuff I'm doing, stuff I'm looking at, and I've done it yet again. I have lassoed my brain into trying to come up with a way of thinking about something that, that's been kind of getting in my head, and I've been formulating this little idea. And I didn't want to write a whole script about it, but I did compile some rough notes that I'll be referring to as I go here, because I learned from my Mickle experience about spending way too much time organizing a whole big video about a nebulous concept that's hard to pin down, and if I even have some real hard point to make about it, rather than just go through like a thought experiment that we could all appreciate and hopefully would be useful for the way that that I talk about stuff and other people too. So here we are. Let me just dump some thoughts on you, and you can tell me what you think about it. So the main idea here is a difference in how people take in stories versus other people, and how we're divided on subjects and our appreciation of them when consuming a particular work of art or story or whatnot. And I was inspired about this by watching the new Mamoru Hosoda anime movie called Belle. Mamoru Hosoda also made The Girl Who Leapt Through Time and Summer Wars, which I'm big fans of. Also made Wolf Children, that I have not seen, but people say is good. So when I heard there was a new movie, I definitely wanted to go see it. And so I saw it in theaters. And it was an interesting time. Of note, Belle is also known in Japan as The Dragon and the Freckled Princess. That's what the name is translated to. It's actually not known as Belle in the East. The thing about Belle, it's actually the third time that Mamoru Hosoda has made the same movie, right? Starting with Digimon Adventure, our war game, or children's war game or whatever, from 2000 or 1999, that was part of the Digimon the movie that released, I think, in theaters. I think I saw it back in the day, with those, what is it, Amanda, Amelia Bedelia, Angela Anaconda, right. Played at the beginning of the movie, remember that?
This is it, DigiPals. In a few seconds, the doors will open for the best movie of all time, the Digimon movie.
Kino. But Digimon Adventure, our war game, was like a 40-minute OVA piece that was amalgamated into like the larger Digimon the movie. That's always been an interesting story I didn't really understand, but now I do. And the story of that, our war game, is the same exact plot as Summer Wars that came out in 2009, and everyone's noticed this for a long time. But then even more bafflingly, just now, at the end of 2021, Belle comes out, and it's the same story again. Or at least the same general premise, same world. There's different intentions behind it, but it's been very interesting to consider why he's done this. He really likes these big, internet story things about, oh, wow, what's our relationship like with social media? And to a degree, I see what he's doing with it, and I've appreciated it. Now, one interesting note is I actually made a game myself in college with a friend of mine called Belle. The name of the game is Belle. I'll put a link to it. I think it's still downloadable. I'll try to find it somewhere. And I have a playthrough of me playing through it, I think on stream I did years ago with my friend Rich, who helped me make it in college. I mean, we were a team, the two of us made it together. And we actually submitted it to a game creation sweepstakes of some kind to win like a full ride to like Full Sail University or one of those game development colleges that are questionable in their utility. But hey, if you get a free ride, that's all well and good. Might as well do it, right? We did not win. We did not get any kind of like notice of celebration, but we did submit it and it was complete. Your mileage may vary on it, but feel free to give it a play if you want to, or just watch like the commentary that we did on my other channel. And we actually had a different name originally, just like the new Mama hosted a movie, Belle. It actually had a different name when it first was made. We were going to call it Fatale, but as we were making our game, another game came out called Fatale, or it might have been like Fatale subtitle. I can't even remember. So we were like, what means the same thing? Belle. So we went with that, because it is about a strong female character, and I think you'll all really get a kick out of it. It's like a puzzle game. It's kind of a mind job. Play it if you want to. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Not important. Not pertinent to what we're talking about here, which is the new Mama hosted a film. So in general, these three movies, right? Belle, Summer Wars, and the Digimon movie, they are all kind of about the same idea about something happening in this very important, vital digital world where something goes wrong and people around the world need to band together to #resist in order to beat the big bad. And it's that kind of story with different, little specifics along the way. But Belle, here's the thing about Belle, it's not great. It is not a great film. It looked pretty most of the time. Something about the CG in the digital world I didn't really like as much as the other films. Something about that felt off in this movie. Not to mention, like, the main girl's avatar as Belle in You, the digital world in Belle, it did not rub me the right way. I did not like how it looked, but whatever, man. The reality stuff that happened in the real world, all that is like classic hosted stuff, looked pretty good. That was all enjoyable and nice. And also the movie, this is kind of like the selling point of it, it's why it's called Belle. It sort of just becomes Beauty and the Beast suddenly, out of nowhere, with its own twists and stuff. And that did not felt set up early on, and it just kind of changes from sort of techno-y stuff, the emotional issues of the main character girl, Suzu, and becomes Beauty and the Beast with a twist. Odd change, didn't really love that, didn't do a ton for me. Cause the thing is, what Belle is, at the end of the day, it's Summer Wars, but for girls. That is unequivocally what this movie is. And in general, there was just a difference in like the way these very similar premises and stories were told to appeal to like a different kind of narrative and a different kind of audience. And the thing is, Summer Wars was very detailed, had very technical writing as to how the events of the story went from point A to point B, what the stakes were, how problems were solved, etc. And I love that about Summer Wars. That stuff is great. But Belle went a little more retarded with things, to put it colloquially. Many events that happen do not make sense, as described specifically in the details of them, but thematically, you get the purpose to them much more like a fairy tale. It's Beauty and the Beast, it's a fairy tale, got it, understood. The thing is, though, considering this is an internet world premise combined with that fairy tale aspect that kind of comes out of nowhere, it feels like those two aspects did not blend very well together, and so we're left with a fairly unimpressive product. That's how it feels to me. So here are some of my questions about, specifically, literally, detail-wise, what is actually happening in Belle. By the way, spoilers for all this, okay, but here we go. First of all, when Suzu Belle gets into the world in the first place, right? This internet world, she makes an account, she logs on, you can become a new you can discover new stuff. It's a pretty advanced mechanism to do it. It like reads your biofeedback, so it's like you're physically there in the game. She just starts singing for no reason. Where did the instrumental come from? Where is the backing track literally playing from? Why did that happen? And how did this come to pass? Technically speaking, it doesn't make sense that she would just start doing that. I get the whole idea that like, oh, you're reborn in a new world. She's getting over her like trauma specifically of not being able to sing in real life like her mom. She used to with her mom or whatever. Got that. But specifically, people don't act this way in real life. It's fairy tale-like, but that doesn't mesh well with, like, literally what button is she pushing on her keyboard? What biofeedback is activating this instrumental? It sure is good that she had prepared an instrumental, put it into the track or whatever, ready to be played, so she could sing a very emotionally relevant song to her character arc. Isn't that convenient? You know, this is what I'm talking about. And this isn't even a trivial detail, because within the world of You, the singer Belle has like her song charting around the world and like making money and getting tons of plays. So there is an instrumental component to it that she just sang when she first got there. It's part of the plot. People are making remixes of it and stuff. It is relevant to the narrative, but it just doesn't make sense where it would come from story-wise, you see? So did she plan to do this song when she got into the world? It sure didn't look like she planned anything or knew what she was doing when she first arrived, but thematically, we just deduce what the authors intended her to be. It's this emerging from her cocoon to the beautiful butterfly. Got it. Next point that relates to that, what are the mechanics of how you connect to you? Do you move in real life along with your avatar? How do you control them? This is deliberately not explained, and we never see a person's body when they're jacked into You in this way. This is obviously intentional because the movie doesn't really have an answer for what they're doing. When Suzu is singing, is she up and gesturing and moving around? Because the first scene in the movie is her kind of waking up, it seems, after doing a concert from the opening scene establishing the world, and she's like lying in bed. You can't sing very well when lying down face first on your bed. Or did she like go to sleep with it? Yeah, all these things are totally unclear. We don't know. But there are also scenes in the movie where she is running in real life home while some emergency is happening in the world, but she is also playing the game at the same time. How can both those things be happening at once? Running in real life while also moving her avatar and searching for the dragon, the beast, as she was in the game at that time. Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but we kind of skip over that for the sake of the narrative. Okay, fine. Next point. Why does Beast Boy, the dragon, have his own magic castle filled with AI servants? Why is that there? Because it would be a convenient place for the specific events of this Beauty and the Beast rip-off narrative parody to happen. All right, fine, but you'd think that everyone has one of those. Maybe everyone does have one. We don't see anybody else's, but okay, fine. And now we're getting into the really important stuff. So why are there no consequences to getting unmasked, as it's called, to have yourself literally doxxed in the world? Why does Suzu face no negative ramifications for that when this is like the main thing to avoid in the game? This is the main fear that is set up. Because not only are there no negative consequences to Suzu, who is like the superstar Belle in the game, she gets unmasked by her own volition later on so she can reach the beast or whatever for that narrative purpose. Not only does nothing negative happen to her, which I could kind of understand because she's like, oh, she's an innocent girl. No one's gonna fuck with her. She's nice and good like us. She had the courage that we don't have, right? I get it on that level. But beyond that, there is literally no discussion even in the narrative after that happens about why nothing bad happens to her. That did not make sense. That should have been dealt with more. The narrative just skips over it and assumes that you will not have any further questions about her literally being shown and doxxed in the game. That was bad. And this raises further questions. So the fact that this unmasking gun exists and some vigilante leader who was apparently given it by the godlike mods of the world or something, okay. This function of doxing is built into the system that can be activated on a whim. Does this make sense? Is this a good way to use this power? Who would sign up for a game in which this could be done to you when the whole idea is like, oh, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen to you in this game? Again, does not make sense why that would be there. Except thematically and what the writer, what Hosoda wants to do with it. These things are not meshing well. And now the real big one. Suzu runs in real life to go save the kid after they fucking find out where he lives with the incredible digital, like, oh my god, enhance that image. Oh my god, such a series of coincidences. So convenient that our friend had been there and knows exactly what these two could be anywhere buildings are in the entire fucking planet. Oh my god, it happens to be within train distance in Japan. Lucky us, hooray. Deeply embarrassing that enhance moment happened. Christ almighty, that was the worst part of the whole movie. Okay, but putting all that aside, assuming that all works out, the idea is Suzu gets there and helps the kids and their abusive father to make him stop so she can save them from this like traumatic environment, blah, 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 right? Got it? Okay. So Suzu stands up to the dad, says, you will not abuse your children anymore. That's not cool, bro. And he is clearly intimidated by her. Someone finally stands up to this bully, basically, and says, you can't do this anymore. Okay, the way that this narrative is left off, I was thinking in my mind as we saw the scene, like, is she gonna take these kids with her? Because that could cause legal issues to run back to, like, her hometown across Japan or whatever. That would definitely cause problems because they're, like, 14 or 15 years old or something, and he's, like, their legal guardian. No, she doesn't take them. They stay with the dad. But the way it's left off is this. The dad is scared off by her when she is physically there, and the older kid, the beast one, is like, I have learned from you, Belle, that I need to stand up to my dad and not just let him bully us or abuse us or something. That's the idea we're left with, right? How do we have a guarantee that the dad is going to no longer abuse his kids? Was Beast Boy really not standing up to the dad before? We saw scenes where he's like, stop, literally, please stop being, like, aggressive to the kids. Frankly, he never actually hit any of them, but he was, like, emotionally abusive. He, like, threw things. There were threats of violence. He threatened to punch him. Who knows if he did off camera. But everything about the narrative constructed it as, like, emotional abuse, that he never actually hit them. So given that being the case, it sounds like the kid was already doing as much as he could. But then at the end, the idea that she has saved them from this is that she just got the boy to decide to stand up to the dad, which it looked like he was already doing. I don't understand. So that's a little weird. But then the big thing, the thing you wonder about in real life is, what is to stop the dad from not only continuing his emotional abuse, but now that he's been confronted by Suzu and these guys, to take it to the next level and actually get really physically abusive with them, or just continue as doing or any of that stuff? There's nothing. There is absolutely nothing to stop that from happening. We're just supposed to accept it, even though it actually doesn't make sense in real life, and it feels like Suzu is being irresponsible, just leaving them alone. So the problem is, I get the theme that is being gone for there, but on the actual detail level, the way human beings actually act in real life, it doesn't make any sense. And it's super questionable and super irresponsible to do, Maybe the idea that's being gotten at here is that in you, life is perfect. Everyone has a great life. We all have fun together in you. It's pretty funny when you think about it like this, that the worst case of abuse of anyone in the world, as far as we know, on you, that's manifested in, like, the traumatic bruise scars on the back of the beast, is a boy being emotionally abused by their dad. Okay, that's obviously terrible. Is that really the worst abuse that we build this whole narrative around? No dad out there is, like, physically attacking their kid who's also playing this game that a sixth of the entire world population. This is a very rosy expectation of what every family and every possible parent relationship is like across the entire fucking planet. You know what I mean? So again, it's just kind of, like, questionable why this one would be singled out, but that one's more excusable because it is getting to this particular theme we choose to focus on. Okay, whatever. This is, like, the worst, most emotionally fucked up kid on the entire planet. Okay, if you say so. But seriously, you have not guaranteed these kids are out of danger or abuse. See what I'm saying? That's the real issue here. So some of these questions might have answers, like we talked about, but the movie doesn't go into them, and it is crystal clear why. Because the story is way more focusing on the themes here than the details of how they're actually being achieved. And those themes are expected to carry the story above those kind of detailed things being laid out for us specifically. And I would argue, like, a satisfying explanation of how X and Y happened, how A led to B along the story progression path, along the actual technical narrative. This is the opposite approach to a movie like Summer Wars, which does do those things. There are themes present, there are specific narratives being gotten at that are different from these other stories that all happen to kind of be the same. Internet, social media, getting at something, everyone comes together across the planet to solve some crisis, right? But in this game, the themes are what everything is supposed to be built on, right? So just to cover some of those questions I raised, there are answers to some of them. Like I said before, how when she gets into the world and starts singing, you could say, that doesn't make sense, why is she singing? Thematically, we know what the answer to that is. It's her overcoming her trauma, and You's been set up as this place. You're born into a new world. Now you can do the thing that you couldn't do in real life. That's pleasant and nice, and I'm glad she can do that. So thematically, there's an explanation. Technically, I find it to be lacking. They could have explained that more. But it's not that kind of story, right? The idea of Suzu having no consequences for being unmasked is to get at this theme that, like, she had the courage to do it herself, and of course no one is going to, like, dox her or cause her real-life problems or anything like that. They accept her as, like, this normal girl who had the courage to be herself, unlike them who are hiding behind their avatars in that way, you know? They have that layer of protection she gives up for the greater good. And because the whole world recognizes that she's being a good person like that, she faces no consequences. Even though, technically speaking, one would think there really should be more discussion of why that happens. Because, what, there's not going to be one asshole who fucking leaks on some website her address and who she is and stuff? I mean, of course, in real life, that would happen. But we skip that in the narrative because that's not getting to what we want to, right? Someone's going to be out there and send 50 pizzas to her house, but we skip that because that's not the theme we're getting at. Let alone that bullshit about during her big emotional song, when everyone's soul turns into a light and ignites, and they all unify around the love of this girl and what a hero she is, which had no narrative purpose whatsoever. It was just there to reach out to the dragon, and it was another one of these things, like in the Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC, you beat all the super bosses, and they're like, well, that didn't do anything. Thank God the fairy godmother shows up to save us from the plot being stagnated, because we chose to write the story for this way for some reason. The balls of lights are purely symbolic and do nothing for the narrative. They just happen to thematically emphasize everyone is being touched across the world, and then afterward, something unrelated, like the kid just is like, oh yeah, I guess I will reach out to her and call her, which the narrative demanded, which could have been done by skipping the song. But it's a movie with songs, I guess we need him in there. And at the end, the idea of the kids being free of their abusive dad or whatever, the answer that we're just clearly being given by the fact that this is a story is that Suzu so physically, psychologically dominated the dad with her pheromones, her swagger, her flexing, that he just is permanently intimidated and can now be swayed by the son's pleas to stop abusing them pretty please. We just assume that they are saved forever and totally out of danger because it's a story, and the way that it ends, it just has to be that way, even though in real life there are many questions we would ask to follow up with about, is she verifying that they are actually no longer being abused? How do we know that? Are they safe? Is the dad threatening them now? Is he getting worse? What's to stop him from going sicko mode on these kids tonight and throwing them out the window? Absolutely nothing is there to do that, and I can't help but wonder. It's only normal to wonder about that kind of stuff. Now, what I'm getting at here is to compare that with the very similar kind of premise of a movie like Summer Wars, his previous movie from 12 years before or so that he's now making again, right? I'm wondering why he's doing this. So in Summer Wars, I totally grant some of the things are very narratively convenient or don't make a ton of sense. So for example, the final battle that happens in Summer Wars definitely is outside the bounds of what a game as presented with the control schemes and the way they log into it. They don't have the kind of, mind hacking device that they have in Belle. There should be much more limitations on what you can do in a game and how game worlds are actually designed than what we see in like that big final battle against Bunny Boy. Things should be a lot more static and grounded. But those things are forgivable because none of what we see actually contradicts the narrative that we see. It doesn't undermine any of it. It just kind of plays it up, and in our mind, we can be a little bit flexible and forgiving with it, right? Of course, to a degree, we can do that, including for Belle and every other movie that has these thematic purposes and don't want you to worry too much about every specific detail. But in general, with Summer Wars, the things that we see and the things that are done are far more grounded. And the System of Oz is a lot more grounded to reality again, which functions kind of more like a Google or a Facebook, which is tied into stuff in real life. And really, the most unbelievable thing that happens in the movie is that at the end, the satellite doomsday that is going to fall in like some nuclear reactor or their house at the end, that thing is controllable via global positioning satellites, which the thing is able to hack into. That's kind of the biggest stretch. In real life, would we tie that into such critical systems, our Google Maps or whatever it is? That is the most unbelievable thing in the story to get past. But we kind of can get past it, because in the story they make it clear that this system is really well vetted and double, triple, quadruple checked, and the actual plot device that guides the entire story, being this one giga hacking AI of Love Machine, was specifically designed to circumvent this stuff and to take advantage of the system. So, it's asking you to take one little leap to accept that, and that is pretty easy to do for the sake of the narrative. But if they keep piling on more and more asks to strain your credulity, that's when you run into issues. And there are other things that strain credibility. I always think that the final moment where the main character at the end, who's like a math whiz or whatever, when he goes sicko mode, truly, he goes ultra instinct in order to use math to save the day, and he solves the math real quick for several rounds to hack into the system to stop the AI from using the GPS to send a satellite to kill them all. The final one he does, where he just does all the calculations in his head, I cannot help but laugh at every single time. That's not how math works. In a moment of crisis, you don't just pull a shonen protagonist and suddenly get able to do math problems in your head you couldn't do before. That is downright ridiculous. But again, there's not too many moments in the story like that, and it's kind of so funny it's forgivable. That's definitely a mark against the believability of the story, but again, everything else that happens makes sense. So little moments like that are forgivable. So this kind of suspension of disbelief stuff it's asking for, using themes to ignore some technical details that may or may not make sense, that's the sort of thing you see all the time in fairy tales or children's stories, anything like that, where you're not supposed to worry about the how and why, but just accept them for the greater moral or the greater purpose of the story. And even in things like high art, where you're sometimes supposed to let your mind absorb the totality of a piece of art, like a banana duct taped to a wall, rather than be bogged down in the specifics of what it all means. So this is to say that it's not like it's as simple as more detail good, less detail bad. I'm more thinking about it how in stories there is a balance to be found between somewhat competing interests of detail versus theming. And you can do both good or bad independently. And so all this thinking, right, watching Belle coming up with these ideas, thinking about how it compares to Summer Wars and the Digimon movie as well, it made me think about some of the debates I've been having lately with people in Talking Pirates, the stream show I do weekly to talk about One Piece, the new chapters, which, by the way, I would love it if you came and watched. It's also uploaded on my secondary channel. I've been having debates that kind of made me think about this stuff on the show itself and in the Talking Pirates Discord, where you could also join if you want to, but about this kind of storytelling consumption divide. So I'm going to talk more about this, and I'm going to be using a lot of One Piece examples, because that's where my mind has gone from this point, and also because I'm an obsessed fanboy and just can't shut up about it. And this divide is basically on whether themes allow us to ignore technical concerns, when it's appropriate, when it's not, the different views on that subject. And so I came up with this label for the issue: thematic versus technical storytelling. So this is my little Mickle pitch thing. This is the consolidation of the idea, the label you can slap on it. And I'm sure that there are other probably ideas that fucking scholars and intellectuals have made up to refer to this stuff in other ways. But this is my attempt, again, to codify it a little bit like Mickle, to give people a way to talk about it, really for myself, and maybe it would be useful for you guys as well. So, thematic storytelling, what actually is that? What am I getting at? I'm talking about stories that are vague in detail, but with an intended meaning that you can deduce, that often rely on suspension of disbelief to do so, or simply don't go into details. And that is opposed to technical storytelling. And this kind is about being specific and precise in how you're constructing a narrative, where you can kind of use logic to deduce where things are going, right? You're not just informed of stuff, you can follow along and see where things are going with it. That's going to be the hallmark of this technical side of things. I'm thinking of these as two separate components of storytelling, and you can do better or worse at each of them independently. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over a bunch of specific story examples from stuff that I'm familiar with, and you might be as well, and get into how these two sides of the story are at play within them, and try to get into the idea of how you can succeed at one or the other on the technical or thematic side, and how they can work together to elevate the entire product. So I'm not going to list specific stories that are like all perfect, or do thematic well and technical bad, or vice versa. These are just examples to like get our brains ticking to see how this idea applies to any given story. So let's dive into some of those. So to get to the One Piece stuff, right, this is why fights like Zoro's recent fight with King in the manga was somewhat disappointing for some of us. And there's been a divide in the streams, whether or not it was great, whether or not it was enough. And I think this kind of gets at why that divide has been so strong, such a harsh one. And what I've deduced about it, based on the way I'm thinking about things, is that that fight was somewhat lacking in technical storytelling, in technical combat detail that has historically made a lot of Zoro fights great. And it became more about the sword lore and the haki. That really is how Zoro won that fight. And the funny thing is, it seemed like Oda kinda teased us about that technical aspect of the fight that is in a lot of Zoro's fights traditionally, about how Zoro needs to do XYZ specific things in order to win the fight, needing to figure out how to cut steel in the famous Mr. One fight, and being able to throw his attacks that he learns during Skypiea, and so on. With King, something like that was introduced with the whole idea that King has this special ability to be invulnerable when he is covered in fire. And of course, a lot of us who are very familiar with Zoro's old fights thought, this is going to be interesting and fun, that Oda has written in this idea that Zoro needs to figure out how to overcome this specific ability of his opponents, and I can't wait to see Zoro use his skill set to do that. However, we unfortunately skip completely past that whole thought process and sort of testing grounds that Zoro would have done, as we just cut away to other fights and cut back to Zoro having simply deduced that, and after that there are no more major hurdles to the end of the fight where he wins. That was a real tease to something that could have been a very interesting and unique aspect to the fight that would have made for a really engaging story of Zoro figuring out and developing before our eyes as like an intelligent and capable fighter. But Oda just skipped that, and even the people who like all the thematic ideas going on in the fight, even those guys seem to agree that this particular invulnerability plotline seemed to be kind of just arbitrarily dropped and skipped over, presumably so that Oda could get back to other fights and he didn't need to spend too much time on any one particular fight, which of course for those of us who'd been waiting for a big Zoro fight felt a little disappointing to see. Zoro's fights are more important than almost anybody in the series except for Luffy, so we naturally have high expectations for them. And we've been waiting a long time since the time skip for Zoro to be really pushed. And one thing to note about that sword lore and hockey is how both those things are really vaguely defined and can conveniently be shaped how Oda needs them to be as the situations change. Because they are quintessential thematic storytelling ideas as they've been presented so far. Because we know what Oda is trying to do with them, even if we can't follow the logic exactly independently, because Oda has not really fleshed them out very much. Yes, we're making improvements on that, things are going more, but you all know what I mean. Hockey, pretty vaguely defined. We're only learning things now, let alone this sword lore that has kind of come out of nowhere recently. Both those things get into a little bit of like Bleach territory, especially with the sword lore stuff, and especially Fairy Tail, where nothing ever made sense, and the characters take world-ending blows like all the time, and somehow survive, and then do the same attack they'd been doing, only like a bigger version that now kills the enemy for some reason that we don't understand, because now it has friendship behind it. Wow, okay. Thematically, you see what he's doing. Technically, seems pretty arbitrary, hard to follow. How about another issue on this subject? This kind of rivalry that's been going on between Law and Kid in the recent fights against Big Mom. I think you all know where I'm going with this at this point, but Law and his OP no me is quintessential thematic powers. Super vaguely defined that really don't even make a lot of sense. And they just keep getting pulled out, right? Most recent one is his cancellation of sound using his room, his room ability. We get the connection to Rocinante, cute, clever, like it on that level, but technically, man, he just keeps coming up with new powers for this guy. You can say, oh, well, you know, inside his room, he can cancel sound waves. I mean, I guess he'd never done that before, and it just feels like a stretch. Law has long since surpassed the amount of new powers that you can just keep piling on a character without it raising eyebrows, and he just keeps getting more. That's what I'm talking about. And Oda can keep doing it forever because there's no restraint on what are Dr. E powers that this fruit can use. Meanwhile, compare that to useless Captain Mid, my man, Kid. Kid, on the other side, is again like the embodiment of technical combat or technical powers being used, in that his powers so far have been super restrained, seem super logical. We get that he has this electromagnetism power, and everything he done has been a logical extension of how those abilities would work. And I'm going to show you the case in point here, because I literally predicted, using facts and logic, how the end game of Kid's powers would be some sort of super weapon, specifically a railgun. And that is exactly what Oda did with his powers. It's not that I'm a super genius or anything, or that I'm literally Oda, maybe I am. It's that Oda has built Kid's powers within a limited framework, and you can see how they logically progress to that point. It just makes sense. And it is really satisfying to watch him do that, and to feel like, yeah, I see where Oda is going with this, and I can follow along. I feel invested in the narrative. That is the opposite of how Fairy Tail fights used to go, and really it's opposite of how Law's abilities just keep appearing out of nowhere. Let's go into some other examples, shall we? Okay, let's burn through some of these quickly. The Katakuri fight in the end of Whole Cake Island. Many of us had issues when that fight ended because it did seem a little bit weird how Luffy stood up to the vastly more powerful Katakuri on basically every single level. The one saving grace has always been Luffy is just a tough boy. He'll get knocked down and keep getting up. There's some logic to that. But really that ending is about the themes. This is why people were forgiving of that, because thematically, we understand what was going on. Luffy has this indomitable spirit, this unceasing will to progress and become Pirate King. And Katakuri's motivation to fight, to save his family and defend them and stuff, would understandably be reduced and weakened by people like Flampe, his own family, conniving, talking shit about him, making it seem like they weren't defending. And we know that the whole Charlotte family are backstabbing assholes to each other, and Big Mom encourages it. So theme versus theme, we get why Luffy would win, even though I stand by, technically, it's a bit of a stretch that Luffy would still win that, and really more it kind of seems like Katakuri just gave up. That being said, still a great fight, but you can see where the issues lie along these axes, I think. Next one, how about how some of us have been a little bit unsatisfied with the degree of buildup and characterization that the Beast Pirates have got in Wano that we're dealing with right now in the Onigashima raid, and compare them to a crew like Baroque Works with Crocodile in Alabasta. The Alabasta boys were set up for arc upon arc upon arc to be intimidating and scary, and Luffy defeating Crocodile after 3 fights, slowly getting more knowledge about how to fight Crocodile to finally overcoming him, felt massively earned, super satisfying to see, and it was just a great end to that arc. And you can just kind of compare something like that to the Beast Pirates that have really been very underwhelming so far. Even though those guys have been built up to be literal endgame tier mega bosses that all the arcs leading up to have built up as these Giga Chads that one would think it would be borderline impossible to stand up to. But the Tobi Roppo, like the new guys rolled out in the Onigashima, they kind of got steamrolled pretty darn easily, and we're seeing the tide turn really quickly on it. So thematically, again, we understand Oda is saying the Straw Hats and their allies are just really strong and good. They're just taken over, but technically it feels like this is lacking a little bit. You want to feel like the Straw Hats had to work a little bit harder. They should work harder than any arc before to overcome all these enemies. But again, you take a lot of the fights that we've seen, the way Sanji ended the fight with Queen, it was a little too easy. Yes, Sanji's got lots of power-ups, but again, these are end game level foes. It should be a more brutal, bloody struggle than ever before, and some of these fights have ended a little too easily for it to be technically satisfying, if you see what I mean. And if you just love the themes we're getting at, you love seeing Luffy gain power and get stronger and defeat Kaido one-on-one now, thematically, I get it, but these are the issues that we're talking about here. Oh, here's a spicy one. How about the character of Whitebeard? I have long been on record as being more Whitebeard critical than almost anybody who talks about this series ongoing, because everybody loves, including me, a lot of the stuff about Whitebeard. He's a big daddy to struggling young boys across the world. He takes them in, he treats them like sons. He was a friend of Roger's. He was like Ace's surrogate father. He accepted Ace for who he was. He didn't have a vendetta because he was Roger's son or anything. And in general, he's just a big, intimidating, cool guy. His Gura Gura no Mi earthquake powers, fucking awesome, super cool to see in the series. So on all those levels, he works really well. However, what guys like me can't totally ignore is that Whitebeard is 0 for 1 in his fights in the series. He lost every battle he engaged in, and he fucking died a Herculean task in a series like One Piece. And this does eat away as his, credibility as such a Giga Chad. You know, him and Ace, yes, they were sacrificial lambs set up to die for the specific purpose in the narrative, but nonetheless, when people go on about how much they love Whitebeard, I just go, 0 for 1, baby! 0 for 1! That bitch ate shit and died! His Gura Gura power couldn't even keep my boy Akainu down. Sakazuki got back up 5 minutes later and was killing pirates, including your wife's son, Ace! Deeply embarrassing stuff, if you see what I'm saying. So those kind of things make me respect Whitebeard a little bit less. On the technical level I'm getting at, you know, the actual events of the story are not as impressive as the reputation we are informed of. That's what I'm saying. And as one final One Piece example that I have no choice but to bring up now, The events surrounding chapter 1044 that just happened in the manga recently, involving our main character, Monkey D. Luffy, and what this says about his history, his past, his future, his abilities, some things involving this very recently introduced sun god Nika, some individual named Joy Boy, etc. I am not going to go into detail about this here because it would take way too long, so I'm going to leave this as an exercise. I want you to think about how the thematic and technical aspects play into this, and maybe you can even predict my opinion on some of it if you've read that chapter. However, if you want to hear my full detailed thoughts on the matter, the Talking Pirates episode is up and running over on that channel. Click the link above. It's a 3.5 hour long video. It would take that long to get into everything, so feel free to go check that out if you care to. Have fun with that. Now here we go. To get outside the One Piece bubble, I've got a couple other examples, like the ongoing debate about what's a better arc that only I am involved in the war on. In Hunter x Hunter, is Greed Island better than Chimera Ant arc? And I think crystal clear the reason why I say that the answer is Greed Island is the superior one is because of these technical issues. And again, I'm more of a technical guy. You could appreciate most, but this is the kind of divide. Some people are more thematic, some are more technical. I know what side I find myself more leaning on, but both are important for a good story, and you want both to make the best stories. So on this debate, people love a lot of the stuff like, what's his name, Meruem, his death scene with chess playing blind girl, whatever her name is. They love the fight against Chairman Netero. Of course, all those things are great. But me and my Giga Brain are back in Greed Island being like, no, this is the pinnacle of Gon's hunt for his father. We see every step of the way that we love that it's connected to this overall arc that we were attached to from the beginning with Gon. That's what I think about, and I love all of that. Meanwhile, Chimera Ant arc, which is great in many ways, it's a side story from that main arc, and it's not bad for that, but, you know, it gets into this kind of whole other thing with the Chimera Ants, whereas, you know, we kind of get off the main track. Meanwhile, guys like me are thinking about how much we love Gon's continued hunt for his dad in Greed Island, how he meets Razor or Laser, who knew his dad personally, and the little hints we get about it along the way. The specific Nen development stuff that is some of the best literal technical fighting I've ever seen against the Bomber at the end. I agree the Bomber wasn't the most charismatic villain of all time, but the specific way that the arc levels up Gon and Killua to learn how to move Nen to the specific parts of their body, super satisfying, super great ending to that. And of course, the big Coom ending when they use their Giga Brain card usage to use a company for Gon to take Killua to go see his dad, and how that was progress along the path. Didn't quite get him to see his dad. Oh, it was so close. But just such a great payoff to the card system that was set up over the arc. Okay, but enough about that. How about Naruto versus Neji and the Chunin exam? So in the battle between Naruto and Neji, it was this whole idea of hard work of Naruto versus Neji's genius. At the time, that's what we were presented with. Yes, I agree the series fucks this up later by going more into the godlike powers that Naruto gets from the fox, him being the fourth Hokage's son, but I don't think that totally undermines it if you just take the story as it existed back then. Yes, he had the massive advantage of the fox and those chakra stores, but still, Naruto had to train and learn how to use it, so it felt pretty earned when Naruto finally beat him. Again, arguably you could say that Neji just continually dominated Naruto in that fight, just beating him down over and over and over again, and Naruto hitting him one time at the chin at the end was the finishing move. So there are kind of technical, illogical things that I see going on in that fight as well. So again, these are just examples to think about these kind of aspects of fights and specific stories. But there you go, what do you want? There's your Naruto example. And let's represent all the big three with an example from Bleach. Yes, everyone's favorite deep manga by our boy Kubo. So the example in question is the fight that happens when Yami reveals he's the strongest one, the strongest Arrancar, number 0, and then he is set up to fight against Kuchiki Byakuya and Kenpachi Zaraki, two giant fan favorites. And the thing about this is, look, themes-wise, whatever, they were here to save Orihime, who cares, doesn't matter. But forgetting that, like, just once this fight is set up, there could have been a really cool technical display of combat abilities. Like, it would have been really fun to see the team-up of the unique set of skills of Byakuya and Kenpachi Zaraki to see, like, how they would mesh together and what, like, a tag team fight of them might look like against somebody like Yami, who obviously should get, like, a focused boss fight scenario. He's the strongest Arrancar. But then Kubo just off screens basically the entire fight, and we just cut back and the dude is dead. So he has this like twist. He sets it up like it's going to be something, and then he puts characters that we really like and would have a lot of experience with the fighting styles of, and then does nothing with it, creating a massive void of disappointment. So just a very strange writing choice, and you can see how this was a massive technical disappointment. No one expected good themes from this fight. And last example just to think about is consider Death Note and the ongoing battle between Light and L. Now that right there is a big technical battle going on intellectually, tactic-wise, between Light and L about figuring out who each other are, while the Death Note itself and its powers are kind of more of a thematic, undefined, fairy tale-esque thing. But it's easy to accept a very grounded story like that with the details laid out so that you can follow it from one idea to the next. There's that one element of magic or mystery added to the Socratic exercise of the story, and that is a classic example of really enjoying watching a technical battle play out, a technical story unfold, where you can logically follow from one step to another what's going to happen next. And just following that progression can be really, really satisfying. When you bog everything down in just themes, oh, the themes justify everything that's happening here, I just think you lose that really satisfying element you can get in stories like that. In that way, you can kind of find yourself in a very convenient place. So when we don't like a story's themes, we can find technical issues to shit on about it. When we do like the themes, we can just say, oh, they don't matter. Don't let a few minor issues prevent you from enjoying the story and its themes. So you see what I mean? In a debate, you can jump to either side of that issue willy-nilly, and no one can really say that you're wrong, but it's just a very convenient tactic to be able to use, and it allows us to argue all day about basically anything, and I love that. And so I've been observing that, and I thought I would give this kind of clarification as I see the issue, hopefully to be helpful. So, for example, here's a personal one for me. Spiral power in Gurren Lagann. Spiral power is a super vague power, very loosely defined in Gurren Lagann, and a guy like me, who loves that kind of technical side of things, might be really annoyed by it and the vagueness of its existence. And I have seen in my life, people I have gotten to watch the show and watched it with, say that they have issues with this on a technical side of things. They're not following the logic, they think it's a little loosey-goosey for them, and they just don't appreciate it. And then as a result, they just don't get into the story. Whereas for me, I love the usage of it and what it gets at in this story so much, I am super willing to look past any small issues like that. With Spiral Power, the specifics are a tad implausible for sure, but I ignore that for the larger messages that I love so very, very dearly. The themes of growing into the man that you need to become, grappling with the harsh realities of existence, and living to honor those that help mold you into who you are, all that shit I deeply love. And I could have looked past a lot of technical bullshittery in order to appreciate those themes in a story. However, on a moment-to-moment narrative level, it happens to be super well written, including on a technical level, if, as I talked about in my old Best Anime Ever Part 2 of Gurren Lagann, it's a Socratic exercise where you just accept some premises like the existence of spiral power, and from that, the rest makes a lot of sense. Not to mention, the story is pretty self-aware about this stuff in typical Imaishi fashion, and it makes a joke of a lot of the conveniences in the narrative that a power like that adds, so it is aware of them, and that helps you to look past them because the show is aware of it as well, and we can all acknowledge, like, okay, this is silly, but it's getting to a larger point, we all acknowledge that, we appreciate that. But for the people who try to watch the show and can't get past stuff like that, well, I can't really blame them. And on that point, rather than call those people stupid, as I might for not liking something that I love so deeply, I would rather just understand on a little bit of a deeper level what's going on and why we aren't seeing things the same way, and namely that they just aren't interested in looking past these implausible events because their attachment to the themes isn't as deep as mine and they don't feel compelled to do so. Or maybe they just have an outright higher threshold for their demands of a technical story to hit certain story beats and make sense on a fundamental level, which I also can't blame someone for having. Which I think is kind of the reason that, like, a lot of our parents out there look at a cartoon and think this is for children. I know a lot of you still get that. I know I do with mine. They just are not able to kind of process that it's not real life, but it can still be taken seriously. There still is craft and art going into it. To me, it seems like the same kind of muscle you exercise when reading, I don't know, Crime and Punishment or some Dostoevsky production, any kind of fictional book. You know, what's the difference? So what I'm saying is, I don't want to get bogged down in specifics or details like that. I would much rather skip the stupid arguments about taste and just understand that people consume media differently and have different priorities, and I'm trying to present that idea here to people to help us all do that. Like how there are different kinds of YouTube reviewers that you go to for different details. Old Total Biscuit you went to for frame rates and what kind of options there are in the settings menu. Other people you go to for, is the story of this game good and satisfying? Different views on different subjects. All of which are perfectly valid. They don't clash with each other, but the individual kind of needs to know what their priorities are when they're looking for input on something like that. So again, going back to One Piece, you can enjoy the technical aspect of a story. So say Luffy versus Rob Lucci at the end of Enies Lobby. After years of watching Luffy grow and seeing him use his specific enumerated powers and attacks to eventually overcome his current enemy and their specific powers and abilities, there is outright pleasure to be found in simply watching that happen, Luffy use those attacks we know and love against the new enemy of the day. Watching that battle play out logically, watching him struggle with those abilities, is pleasurable in of itself. But you can also enjoy the thematic aspect of a fight like that, in this case, where a freedom-loving pirate like Luffy goes to battle against the overbearing will of the tyrannical world government and conquers it, that is embodied in Rob Lucci personally during this fight. You can appreciate either side of this fight, or both, or neither, but the best kind of fights to me are the ones that succeed on both of those levels. So some kind of like technical version of the fight that doesn't really get at interesting themes the way the Lucci one did would have been fun for the technical guys, but not the theme guys. But what if the fight was really thematically resonant, as it was now, but it just didn't make a lot of sense and Luffy just won in some inexplicable way? You know, you can just imagine ways for it to fail or succeed in all kinds of different ways along these lines. When you do both successfully, I think that is when kinography is born, as it most certainly was in the Rob Lucci fight. Luffy getting hit with that last final Rokuogan from Rob Lucci when he grabbed him with his tail, and Luffy almost going down in that moment. A lot of us, even at the time, were a little bit like, damn, Luffy's really still standing after this one? That's strange belief. But it doesn't matter, because when you just see Luffy digging so goddamn deep to unleash the jet Gatling that finishes Lucci finally, we all love it so much that it still works for us, even on a technical level, because of course, Luffy just refusing to go down is a common thing with that dude. It starts to strain believability just a bit, but not enough to be a problem for that fight, and thus, the kinography. And that fight is one of the most celebrated in the entire series for very, very good reason, because it succeeds on basically every level. Now, some of these ones we've been seeing lately about hockey coming in that hasn't even really been set up to just solve the problem a little bit more esoterically, this is why some of us raise issues about it. But that's the end of our One Piece section of this discussion. And so while I think I've been pretty clear about this, I just want to emphasize one more time that even though I've been sucking a lot of technical dick up in this bitch, the thematic stuff is super important as well, and it's easy to imagine a story getting overly bogged down in a really technical description of events that play out in the course of a story, and it loses track of the themes that get you attached to a story in the first place. Now, if I could be so bold, I might say that this is something that Hunter x Hunter has currently gotten itself involved in, even though it is spiraling into death slowly or quickly. I'm not sure which you'd say. Either way, rest in peace. So yes, again, themes have to be relevant and prominent, and you have to care about them and like them a lot still. You have to be attached to the reason why the technical stuff gives you a motivation to keep reading the story and seeing where things are going. And you also have to succeed on a technical moment-to-moment level to make things make sense and deliver a satisfying arc of a story. So here's my takeaway, going back to Belle for a little bit. I think Belle was definitely lopsided toward the thematic side of things and neglected the technical side a little bit, which I don't think was a very good fit for this kind of story about internet, social media stuff that has kind of like a technical spin to it inherently, and then the fairy tale aspect just did not gel with it very well. And in that way, Summer Wars did a much better job of meshing these ideas to create a fantastic narrative. And I mean, hell, I haven't even talked about the other stuff that I absolutely love about Summer Wars, like the wonderful family vibe and like the fun summer atmosphere. Oh my god, the movie is just a complete masterpiece and joy to watch. Check it out. But to be fair, the whole narrative Belle had of the main girl, Suzu, overcoming her trauma about her mom dying and stuff, I understand it, and I liked her growing and becoming basically the hero of the story who is willing to make sacrifices to help others. That's a great message, even if I'm not sure if she's really going to follow through on helping those kids. But just on a personal level, seeing someone overcome their mental trauma like that is just not a story I personally resonate with particularly deeply. That kind of theme isn't really wrapped up in my personal life history, so I'm not as inclined to be forgiving of the kind of technical issues that I do see all over the place and the shortcuts they take that easily. In that way, the Summer Wars narrative of a shy, normal boy rising to the challenge to basically become a man and get the girl, that's an arc I resonate with way more, and so it elevates an already technically stunning story even higher for me, as opposed to Belle. Now, if you are a teenage girl with social anxiety or trauma or whatever, if such a rarity could even exist in modernity, you probably would connect way more with Belle and be more forgiving of what I've been complaining about here. And I cannot say I blame you. There are different kinds of people out there, and they're going to get different things out of stories. I just think it would be really useful if we keep in mind those differences when we weigh people's opinions on them. But the truly exceptional stories gotta have both sides of the coin. Thematic and technical narrative excellence. But even being aware of my bias, seriously, Summer Wars did a perfect job and is a 10 out of 10 movie. If you take one thing away from this video, it's this: watch Summer Wars. Also read One Piece. Well, there you go. Hopefully I've given you another little thinky device to use, another sociological tool for the thinking gamer to consider when we talk about why we like or dislike stuff and why we might disagree with others when we're all looking at the same set of facts. Maybe next time you're about to get into that huge autistic argument with someone about something that you both love, maybe think that, maybe this person resonates more strongly with the themes, and that's why they aren't as concerned about my autistic detailing of these technical issues in the narrative, or vice versa. Technical versus thematic storytelling. I hope it can help you have such an experience. Cheers, kampai, I'll see you on the old dusty trail. Oh, and come watch Talking Pirates if you're also a One Piece obsessed freak like me. And that's it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that little segment from the BGE Monthly Cast. For the full episode, head over to my Patreon or Subscribestar, linked in the description, and pledge to get access to it and all 20+ episodes. Big thanks to everybody who supported the channel, who you can see on screen right now. And just think of it, you could be one of these chosen few. Wow. Think about it. Bye-bye.